Yeah, so maybe I just step back a bit. So this is my outline of my presentation. So
Präsentationsübersicht.
I'll move into our work, which is on French national parks, notably what Jeff has mentioned, the Darwin Black Bee Box, and then move into Ile de Goix into more detail. So I'll move quickly. So as I've said, we work on translating scientific information for the public. Two, we do advocacy. This is through Brussels and in other partner European countries, mainly Italy and Belgium and Switzerland. And finally, which I'll speak about, is the project part. So as you've heard the last day and a half, I think this conference is a bit about seeing the bees as wild pollinators, but also on what we do, what can we change. And I think this was an important point at the end of yesterday's conference on what we can actually do. And so how can we do things differently? We think we can. And so I'll give two examples that some other speakers have already touched upon. Just one project to let you know what we do for wild pollinators, including bees, is in Vanoise, 3 national parks in France. Vanoise National Park, Champagne, Bourgogne, which is the newest national park in France, and Port-Cros, which is in the south. So we're looking at trying to define specific environmental drivers that are affecting the decline of pollinators. So we do this through an inventory. We look at the plant-pollinator relationships between and among these pollinator communities. And in that, at the end, we try to contribute to the data that is very little, as you know, as many of you, as we heard yesterday about the red list for pollinators and what's happening with pollinators, we try to contribute to this on a small level, because it's only 3-4 projects that we're focusing on. So of course we're collaborating with different labs in France, but also in the UK. So, as Jeff and Hazim mentioned in the presentation before me, we are working, well, the Darwin Black Bee Box, so I'll just go into a bit of detail on what it is exactly. It was coined by Thierry Blanquier and Delphine Penzera. The 2 main points, as Jeff mentioned, is to propose a natural selection to develop honeybee colonies without treatment. And the project is mainly on domesticated colonies, so it's on managed colonies, of course. And the second is how to do it, and it's about mating queens and drones for the strong colonies that the project will acquire, 6 months into the project. So, just to give you a bit of background, it was initiated in 2007 in the Netherlands. It's been going on for 10 years, and they do have populations that are now existing without treatment and varroa resistant. And what is, I think, quite special about this particular program is that, as we've heard, there is no focus on a specific mechanism. As it's called, Black Bee Box program, it looks at the colony as a whole and how it works as a system to develop this resistance against varroa. And the other solution, and this is probably more specific to this group here, is it could be a program to apply to commercial beekeepers. So I'll go through the protocol very briefly, and you'll see that, in fact, what we've tried to do in France is to attract non-commercial beekeepers, but beekeepers that are focused on a more economic focus for the bees, their bees. So as you see, we started last year in 4 conservatories. One in Orne, Ile-de-France, which is close to Paris, Auvergne, and Savoie. So Savoie is more mountainous. It's a mountainous region by the Alps near Italy and Switzerland. Auvergne is the middle, so it has more valleys, forests. Same with Ile-de-France. And Orne is the more northern, not so Brittany, but a bit over to the east. And next year, we're adding another conservatory, and we hope it will be Belle-Île, which is beside Ile-de-Gois. So I show you a picture of Savoie. So there are this team, Kleber, who Jeff works with quite often. They are a group of beekeepers in Savoie, all voluntary. It's all on a voluntary basis. There are about 20, maybe even more, I'm not sure, but the people you see there were the core of this Darwin Black Box program in Savoie. And this picture is, I think, it's a good presentation of where we moved the colonies after the first 8 months, after the protocol started. So just to briefly go through the protocol, and you can read this in Taird's article in 2019, where they describe the protocol in more detail. So we started with 15 to 17 colonies in each site, in each of the 4 sites, in parallel, going together. And then we had 7 control.
Und dann hatten wir 7 Kontrollvölker.
That you needed to work with the local colonies. So to work, not bringing, not only the local, but also a diverse number of beekeepers. So in Savoie, in most of the 4 locations, the beekeepers are spread out throughout the area. So it was important to gather 2 or 3 or 4 from each of the areas, depending on how many there were, to add 15. Now we didn't get 15 in all sites, but the minimum was 10. So it was a bit difficult for one of the sites to get 15. And the last is, the idea is to choose the colonies that are strong. And you, as beekeepers, and you know your colonies very well, as was mentioned earlier. So these are just some photos. This is from Auvergne. As you see, it's very forested, and we work together with it's called in French, so it's the Forest Association. So it's UNF, but it's run by the state, but it's in collaboration with the Forest Reserve. So there are barriers to these forests, and they're checked quite often. And so these pictures you see are after the 7th month of the protocol. So in January, you start the protocol. You pick your colonies, and you monitor them monthly. You check the queen. So usually in June, I think it was dependent on the site, but June or July, you look at the queen, the brood, and if you evaluate that they're ready, then that's the time that you move. So you try to get 4 from each box, and you move them into the other site. And you see in the picture on the right is where we moved the 55 colonies. So we started in Auvergne with 11 colonies, so it wasn't as much as we hoped, but as you see, the product of 50-odd colonies, and you spread them out. Taird has recommended that you put 5 or 4 together, and you put them throughout the location. And there you have Noel, who is the head beekeeper there for the group. So as I was saying, so you try to obtain 4 colonies from each artificial swarm, and I don't put the protocol in detail. You can read that. I'm not the expert on the protocol, but we based it on Taird and Delphine. And in fact, they worked with us very carefully. So they came each they came for the end, for the divisions, but they worked quite closely with the beekeepers, and of course the beekeepers know their bees very well, so it was very easy to work with Terd and Delphine. And as I don't know if most of you know, but they are both beekeepers, but they're researchers as well. There you see Terd there in the yellow, Delphine is on the right, and this is Auvergne also. So I just give you some reflections of the first year. And this is based on Terd and Delphine. It was a tough year in France for the beekeepers. We had a tough winter, and we had one location who only came out with 10 divisions. So it's not enough to stay in the protocol. So this is also why we're adding another site. But the beekeepers, all sites, they were quite organized, and the nukes were good. And so now we're ready for the second year, and we're going into, it's a 4-year program. And this second year, we see how they will survive. And the locations each range between 30 to 60 boxes. So it's quite I think for us anyway in France, it was quite an accomplishment, because some of these sites also, they're not commercial beekeepers, but they depend economically on the production of honey. So the aim was to help them separate some of their colonies and put them into this program. So just to end, I think in this example, it's showing us a bit that our bees, at least in Apis mellifera and some of the locations, they're surviving with varroa through natural selection. So I don't want to repeat, and I hope I will not, but so what are we doing on Ile de Gois? So Colonies is working with the reserve, natural reserve, littoral, forest, and the beekeepers on the island. And we work on 3 main projects. So one is to understand how the managed hives are living with varroa, and this study is this year. Well, it's a continuation of what Jeff has done in the last 3 years with Yves, Leconte, and Jeff. The second one is what he's just done, which is the 3-year, and I'll give you some of that data soon. And the third is looking at the survival of the wild and managed together. So this is not only a tracking, but I'll talk a bit about that in the next slide. So for Gois, the varroa study is we are asking 3 main questions. It's to study the resistance mechanisms and, in addition, the behaviors of the bees. 2, it's to study the virulence of the mites and the levels of varroa infestation on the bees. And 3, it's to determine the level of integration, which is mixing, as most of you know, of other bee species on bees on Gois. I just give you some examples. Jeff has already covered some of it, but as you see, we did this last spring. Spring. And you see the little purple, there's a varroa on the pupae there. And so this is what we did. We did this twice already. And we understood that on Gois, the managed colonies are, so and I just repeat it because I think Gois is a very special place. They're not treating. Yeah, this always creates a bit of, so he is a beekeeper on the island, and he's the Romeo of the island, I have to say. He's the stud of the island. Women adore him, and bees adore him. He doesn't touch the bees. He's one of the few beekeepers, even more distant than the rest of them. As Jeff said, they don't treat, they don't sugar, and they don't get honey. They get honey excessive if there's excess. They take some pollen also if there is some excess, but they don't touch the bees. And Henri Michel is completely, as you see, he has the racket because there's lots of frelons at that time. Last year there was a nest nearby, so he was dealing with the frelon. So as you see on Guam, it's, they're doing natural beekeeping all by themselves. Christian is the head beekeeper there, and he has been instrumental in promoting this natural beekeeping on the island. There's around 250 hives on the island. It's a lot. What I understood from our pollinator specialist, we're doing a study looking at the pollinator, what the issue, what the relationship is between the managed and the wild pollinators generally, but also the managed and the wild apis on the island. So we're trying to understand what's happening on the island, and we understood our first impressions are that there are too many managed colonies. So this is data from Jeff, who, as you see, the varroa, it almost doesn't exist. Normally, as you know better than I, the varroa in the fall should be 5 or 10 times more than what it is, and it is stable the whole year. I've just done a count of varroa just before coming to Weimar, and we looked at six apiaries, and we put a planche, what's a planche? A board under six of the boxes in 6 apiaries and we leave it 24 hours, and then we examine it the next day to see how many mites are on the board. And some had none, and 2 boards had 20 mites that fell. So you see that this environment on Guam is quite phenomenal. Mites should be, as I said, double, 5 times more than what they are. And this is Marcel, who is one of the beekeepers on the island. She's very special. She has a beautiful apiary, and she also, so all of them they all love their bees, but more importantly, they don't, so all the boxes are now closed. They don't touch them until April next year. And I just show you the varroa on the right. I know Jeff had shown you already, but this is where, this was taken last spring, and as you see, the bite, the grooming, it's quite strong. So I move now, Guam is very special, but these next few slides are about the wild colonies on Guam. This one is in a wall in the one part of the Grignon, which I don't exactly know where it is. I've forgotten the north side of the island. I just show you some pictures on. So if you don't know Guam, it is on an island close to Brittany, and it's windy. The weather is ferocious, rain, and 2020, Christian and Jeff found a hive, a colony underneath the dolmen, and it survived 1 season, 1 year. So it survived 1 winter, and then it died the 2021. Just another photo of a wild colony. This is the most, as I was telling you, I was just there, and this is the newest wild colony. So this one was done in 2021, and it's near this particular colony. So, I mean, we're not making any assumptions that the swarm moved there, but this one is the newest one that was found last week in one of the walls of one of the houses on Guam. So we see if it survives next year. So what do we know on Guam? We know that the managed and the unmanaged hives, colonies are the same. We recently just did a genotype SNP analysis on the wild and the managed colonies, and it's telling us that they're the same. There's no pesticides on the island, so we did a wax analysis last year, and there's no pesticides. And we know that this population is very special as the managed colonies coexist with the varroa. And I maybe just end with, I think it's the end, yeah. Just to, part of our work on Guam is to protect this island. We've recently worked with scientists who are, some of them have, I mean, 2 or 3 of them have presented to you today, or this past conference, and we are working to protect any transport of foreign bees on the island, to make sure that this island remains, not to bring any foreign bees in, because it's the relationship between the colonies and the pollinators are quite fragile, we believe. And this is why we're also continuing the studies on Guam. So, I don't know, I don't think I need to, the conclusions are quite clear. And again, I think what the take-home message from me to you today is, I think there is room to develop colonies that are resistant to varroa without treatment through Darwin Black Box. But we understand that the interests, of course, with bigger operations is economically difficult. But we encourage you to look at this protocol. Terre and Delphine work with a lot of beekeepers in Europe to try to push this program forward. Okay, I think I'm done. Thank you. Thank you.
Habt ihr das kapiert, gell? Die Milbe, die da gezeigt wurde, die wurde aber an...
Did you get this? The mite that was shown there was bitten. Has that been translated correctly? So, that was a grooming bite.
Italian wine.
Oh.
Italian wine and olive oil with a bit of glyphosate.
Just a bit,
Just a bit, yeah?
Just a bit.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Great.